I was pretty sure that Stafford has the MVP wrapped up, but then Drake May has a game like this. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL Top 10's for Tuesday. Welcome to this podcast. Man, we had a good game last night between the Rams and the Falcons, and we'll talk about that game actually probably tomorrow. I got to get through the Sunday games, and then we'll talk about that. Whoa, it's a busy week coming up. Even though there are no games on Saturday, no NFL games not on Saturday, no NFL games on Thursday, but there will be on Saturday and Sunday. As with the NFL season wraps up, puts everybody on a fairly even plane if no one's playing on Thursday. So plus it's New Year's Day, we have bowl games and stuff like that anyway. So looking forward to it though. But yeah, we're going to cover some more Sunday games, and I wanted to cover all the games, but man, the Sunday night game and the Monday game had just way too many players with top 10 kind of numbers, especially the Chicago-San Francisco game. I mean, McCaffrey's just going crazy as far as records go, and then Stafford as well on the Monday night game, just not just team stats, but NFL stats. So there's a lot to talk about in those games. Now, we'll cover 5 games this time through and wrap it up a little quicker than 50 minutes. I've been going like 50. Maybe I'll get it back down to more like 30. But beyond that, let's get going, and we'll have a little more to say after we get through these games. So let's start off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Miami Dolphins. Tampa Bay just does not want to win this division. They're doing their best to lose out, and now it comes down to maybe this last game. The way I understand it now that Atlanta was able to beat the Rams on Monday night, if Atlanta wins again this Sunday, it doesn't matter if Tampa Bay wins or not. Carolina is the division winner. So, boy, Tampa Bay's got to be rooting for whoever Atlanta is playing. But Tampa Bay lost again to Miami 20-17. Wow. I mean, I don't know what they're doing. I personally am just kind of at a loss. I honestly am, because I thought, well, they're a good team. They'll get their players back that they've been missing, and they'll be ready to go. But no, they've gotten back Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and they're still not, and Bucky Irving, and they don't look any better. And it really is coming down to Mayfield. I guess he's playing injured, which is the reason he's having such a rough time. But man, they just aren't able to pull it off anymore. This game, they had the lead right off the bat, 7-0. That was it. After that, they were playing from behind. Miami ended up winning this game 20-17. Let's look at some of the numbers here. Tampa Bay, and this is another sad thing. Tampa Bay, 21 first downs to Miami's 13. 380 net yards for Tampa, 298 for Miami. Here's the problem. Even with Bucky Irving back, you would think if there's a problem with Mayfield, run the ball more. But they had 53 yards rushing, net yards rushing in this game. So I'm not sure really what the problem is. But 2 interceptions by Mayfield, that's costly. And Tampa Bay had the ball for over 32 minutes to less than 28 for Miami, and yet they could not win this game. So Baker Mayfield threw the ball 44 times. Maybe that's too many times. Not too bad of a quarterback rating. 33 completions on 44 attempts, which is a very good percentage. 346 yards, almost 8 yards an attempt. 2 touchdowns, but 2 costly interceptions, sacked 3 times. Had a quarterback rating of 93.6. Now, this Quinn Ewers that came in, took over for Tua Tagovailoa, only threw the ball 22 times, had 14 completions, 172 yards. So he was close to 8 yards an attempt as well. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Now, one of his receptions or passes was for 63 yards, so that accounted for quite a bit of his 172 yards. He had a quarterback rating of 118, so really not bad. Like I said, the running game here, they only tried to run at Tampa Bay, that is, 16 times for 53 yards. That's 3.3 yards a carry. Bucky Irving had 9 carries for 19 yards, just over 2.1 yards a carry. One of his runs was 12 yards, so that means he had 8 carries for 7 yards on the rest of them. They just really, it doesn't even seem that they really tried to run it much. For Miami, Devon Achane, of course, led the team with 18 carries for 83 yards. Jalen Wright had 5 carries for 56 yards. Wow. That's 11 yards a carry. But one of them was for 32. So they ran the ball 30 times for 145 yards. That's 4.8 yards a carry. Not bad at all. And that controlled the game for them in some degree. Now for Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan led the team. Both of them had 7 receptions. Godwin had 108 yards. McMillan had 114 yards, but Godwin did have a touchdown. So those are your 2 leading receivers. Mike Evans, 3 catches, 31 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted 7 times. So he was right up there almost with Godwin and McMillan as far as targets. Now, Emeka Egbuka, their rookie, 3 catches, 20 yards on 5 targets. So he's really definitely slowed down. Bucky Irving coming out of the backfield had 5 catches, but only 14 yards. So, he only ended up with 34 total yards in this game. Not good at all. Now for Miami, as I said, they only passed for 172 yards. Craig Dulcich had 5. He led the team with 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. Those catches, Devon Achane coming out of the backfield had 3 catches for 29 yards. So he had a decent game. He had 112 yards total offense. And then Jalen Waddle, he gave it a go, but he's not. He just wasn't ready to play, and so he had 1 target but no catches. He's hurt, and I guess he tried to make a game of it, but he couldn't do it. All right, let's look at some of the numbers here for Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield this season now with a couple more touchdown passes gives him 25 this year to put him into tie for 10th for most passing touchdowns in a single season. But you got to remember, last year, he ended the season with 41 touchdown passes. Now, you knew he'd have some regression, but down to 25, it's been quite a different season, and especially the second half of this season. So he's got 25, which is good enough, like I said, for 10th. All right. Now for Miami, Devon Achane just continues to move up in the rushing yards in a single season for the Miami Dolphins. He had 83, which gives him enough to have 1,350, which moves him into 3rd place all-time in rushing yards in a single season for the Miami Dolphins. Ricky Williams holds the top 2 spots, so that's be the next target. And Devon easily should catch the 2nd spot. He only needs 22 yards, but he won't make past Ricky Williams' all-time record of 1,853 for the Miami Dolphins. Now, next game up, this is the New England Patriots. Man, they have a good team. And, it's beating up on a bad team, so sometimes it makes it hard to tell. But the New England Patriots went into MetLife Stadium in New Jersey to play the Jets, and they beat them 42-10. This game was over at halftime. Halftime, the score was 35-3. The Jets got a touchdown in the 4th quarter. That was it. So, and that was on a Brees Hall run of 59 yards. But back by then, who do the Patriots have on defense? Probably their backups, Looking at the numbers, the Jets did have 307 yards of offense, but New England had 440. 28 first downs for New England, 14 for the Jets, so they doubled them up there. Really a good game for them. Close everywhere else, though. The Jets made third down on 5 tries out of 16 for 31%. They also went for it on fourth down 6 times, made it twice. So they're able to make third or fourth down 7 out of 22 times for about a 32% there. On the other hand, the New England third down efficiency was 4 third down makes on 9 tries for 44%, but they went for it on fourth down twice, and they got it both times for 100%. Here's a big, interesting stat. This is one of the differences you see with Drake May. He likes to throw the ball downfield. So both teams had almost the same amount of plays, total plays. The Patriots had 62 plays. The Jets had 63. But the Patriots averaged 7 yards per play, while the Jets averaged 5. That's a big difference. All right, let's look at some of the numbers. Boy, Joshua Dobbs even got in this game later. But Drake May, 19 completions on 21 attempts, so only 2 incompletions, 256 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, sacked once, had a quarterback rating of 157. Holy cow. Boy, and I was pretty sure that Stafford has the MVP wrapped up, but then Drake May has a game like this, and then on Monday night, Stafford did not look good, threw 3 interceptions, had a couple of touchdowns, brought the team back, but still did not look nearly that good. So this really tightens up this race. This last game of the season could be the determining factor between Drake May and Matthew Stafford. I think those are the two guys. Now for the Jets, they continue to play Brady Cook, 19 completions on 33 attempts, so a bit over 50%, only 152 yards passing though. Same amount of completions as Drake May, but 104 yards less. So Drake May had 12.2 yards per attempt. Brady Cook had 4.6. Big difference. Brady Cook threw 1 interception. He had a quarterback rating of 56.6. Now, look at the running game. Travion Henderson, 19 carries for 82 yards. That's 4.3 yards a carry. And then Stevenson also had 8 carries for 47 yards. That's 5.9 yards a carry, and he had a touchdown as well. Drake May ran the ball for 22 yards on 3 attempts. They ran the ball a lot, 36 times for 155 yards. That's 4.3 yards a run. For the Jets, they ran it 28 times, so fewer times, but 164 yards, 5.86 yards a carry. Really good. But that's because Brees Hall had 14 carries for 111 yards, but 59 on 1 carry. 59-yard touchdown run on the 1 carry. So that kind of skews those numbers. In the receiving department, Stephon Diggs, 6 catches for 101 yards, and one of them was an amazing catch. So he had a really good game, had a touchdown as well. Ramon Stevenson had 5 catches for 55 yards, including a touchdown reception. So he ended up with 102 yards of offense, so not bad for him. And which is kind of interesting that Henderson did not have any catches in this game. So was Stevenson coming out of the backfield. Tight end Hunter Henry had 3 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown as well. Boy, they had these touchdowns going around. Austin Hooper, another tight end, had 2 catches for 11 yards and a touchdown. And then Efton Chisholm, I don't think anybody had him on their fantasy team. He had 2 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown as well. So like I said, 5 touchdowns. And everybody had 5 different players got one of them. Now for the Jets, Isaiah Williams, 4 catches for 30 yards. That was the most receptions by a player. And then John Mechie had 3 catches for 41 yards. So he had the most yards receiving. And that's it. Nobody had more than 4 catches. Whole bunch of people had a catch. 11 different players caught a pass for the Jets, with Isaiah Williams having the most. So not much to say there. Now in this game, Drake May, in passing yards in a single season, went into the game in 15th most passing yards, had 256, which moves him up into 10th spot all time for the New England Patriots in passing yards with 4,203. Tom Brady has 9 of the top 10 spots, and now he has 8 of the top 10 because Drake May will now have the 10th spot. The only other spot in here is number 6 is Drew Bledsoe, but Tom Brady has every other spot on this list now. So Drake May, good for him. Second year in the league, and he's made it into the top 10. Has a chance to move up a few spots, but we'll see what happens and how they play him this next week. All right, so Drake May has had a really good season, MVP caliber when you look at all the quarterbacks around. Also, though, on the other end of this scale, Drake May was sacked 1 time. He's now been sacked 47 times, which puts him in a tie for 4th all-time in sacks for the New England Patriots. So he has been sacked quite a few times this season. But other than that, he's been doing very well. All right, now looking at the Giants. Go to our next game here. And we'll skip that. We'll go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. And I only skipped it because I realized that in that game there are no top 10s, but we'll still talk about the game. Look at the how it went for these two teams. Man, Pittsburgh is another team. All they needed to do was beat Cleveland. They could not do it. And they had the division wrapped up if they could just have won that game. And by losing, they open up the game now between themselves and the Baltimore Ravens on, I think it's on, I'm not sure, Saturday or Sunday, but that game will decide the winner of their division. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, wow, lost this game 13-6. How bad is that? They're 9-7 now, and the Baltimore Ravens are 8-8. So the winner of that game between the Steelers and the Ravens wins the division, and will be the only team from that division to go to the playoffs. So in this game, what a bad game. Cleveland jumped right on top at 10-0 at first quarter and then just hung on. Had a field goal in the fourth quarter to seal the deal. For Pittsburgh, no touchdowns, 2 field goals, and it was really kind of a very slow-moving game here. Pittsburgh had 291 yards of offense. Cleveland had 262. And then, wow, just really would have been a tough game to watch. Third down efficiency for Pittsburgh, 3 out of 15 for 20%. On fourth downs, they were 0 for 3 for obviously 0%. And then Cleveland was only slightly better. On third down efficiency, 4 out of 11 for 36%, and had 1 try on fourth down, which they did not get. Everything else was fairly even. Time of possession was within a minute, a little over a minute more for the Steelers. Steelers had 15 first downs to 11 for Cleveland. The yardage, like I said, was close. Looking at these quarterbacks, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is running out of steam or what, but he had 21 completions on 39 attempts, so he threw the ball quite a bit, only 168 yards, 4.3 yards an attempt. That's been his MO all season. But, after some point, teams just have that figured out. And I don't care how great his arm is. It just makes it hard to move down the field at 4 yards and a pop. It's just not going to work very well. What did they have? Yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers averaged 4.5 yards a play. And it's just hard to move down the field at that rate if you got to go the entire field. But Aaron Rodgers, again, 21 completions, 168 yards, 2 sacks, 64.9 quarterback rating. Shadir Sanders, 17 completions on 23 attempts. Not too bad. 186 yards, so 8.1 yards an attempt. Much better there than Rodgers. 1 touchdown, but he did have 2 interceptions, which kept this game a little closer than it might have been. He ended up with a quarterback rating of 75.6. For Pittsburgh Steelers rushing, Jaylen Warren, 12 carries for 64 yards. That's 5.3 yards a carry. Kenny Gainwell, 7 carries for 26 yards, 3.7 yards a carry. For the Browns, Dylan Sampson came in. Man, Judkins had that bad injury. He's out. Sampson had 11 carries for 27 yards. That's 2.45 yards a carry. Raheem Sanders had 8 carries for 21 yards. That's 2.6. And then Shadir Sanders had 4 carries for 20 yards. Pittsburgh Steelers in receiving, Jonnu Smith led the team with 5 catches for 18 yards. Really not much going on here. He had the most receptions. Pat Freiermuth, tight end, had 3 catches for 63 yards. That was the most receiving yards. Tried to get the ball to Marquez Valdez-Scantling 9 times, only had 3 catches, though, for 21 yards. He was the most sought-out receiver, but just wasn't getting any receptions. Now, for the Browns, Jerry Jeudy led the team with 5 catches for 54 yards. Dylan Sampson coming out of the backfield, who has had some pretty decent receiving games, but had 3 catches for 0 yards. And then Harold Fannin had that big catch, 2 catches for 30 yards. One was 28-yard touchdown pass. That was the only touchdown in the game. So that is the game between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Cleveland possibly has helped to dash Pittsburgh's hopes of going to the playoffs. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, you got another season where you might even win the division, but you're going to have at best 10 wins, kind of the standard routine for the Steelers right now. And the fear among Steeler fans is even if they make the playoffs first round, they're out, and that's another season where one and done in the playoffs. So we'll see. Maybe things will change, but they got a lot to look at after this season as far as quarterback goes and so forth. All right, now, part of the problem for the Steelers, obviously, and it's going to be the same problem next week, is Metcalf's out because of his decision to interact with a fan in the stands. He's suspended for 2 games, which, how critical are these 2 games now? And now he won't be there for the next game against the Ravens either. Really hurts the Steelers. All right, let's do the New York Giants and the Las Vegas Raiders. Wow, the Raiders have, I heard somebody say, have really figured out how they want to try to get that number 1 draft pick. And they just have not been putting anything together at all. I mean, the Giants aren't a powerhouse. Both teams went into this game with 2 wins. The Giants crushed the Raiders in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, 34-10. They just rolled right over them. The Raiders, the offensive line is gone. Crosby, their best defensive player, is out on injured reserve. They don't have anybody left, really. It just was a sad spectacle in a way. For the Giants, they had 22 first downs. The Raiders had 14. Net yards for the Giants, 343 to 231 for the Raiders. Raiders only had 63 yards rushing. That's sad because that's Genti not getting much done. The Giants had 155. Third down efficiency for the Giants, 6 out of 13 for 46%, plus they made it on fourth down once. The Raiders, 3 out of 13 for 23%, but they did make it on fourth down 4 out of 5 times for 80%. Otherwise, the game was fairly close, numbers-wise. Jackson Dart for the Giants, 22 completions on 30 attempts for 207 yards. That's 7 yards an attempt. Quarterback rating. Geno Smith got hurt. He went out. He had 20 completions on 28 attempts for 176 yards, so a little less there. 6.3 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, but another 2 interceptions. I think he's going to lead the NFL in interceptions, I mean, probably. Sacked 3 times for 24 yards. He had a quarterback rating of 69.9. And then Kenny Pickens came in with two completions on 2 attempts, but too little too late. Looking at the running game, Tyrone Tracy led the team with 14 carries for 62 yards. That's 4.4 yards a carry. Jackson Dart ran it 9 times for 48 yards, 5.3 yards a carry, and he had 2 touchdowns rushing. So he was all over the place, running again as usual. Who knows what kind of numbers he would have had if he played the entire season, if he could have stayed healthy for the entire season too. Devin Singletary also had 8 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. So they had 3 rushing touchdowns. And then for the Raiders, Genti carried the ball 16 times. Not bad. 60 yards, 3.75. So that's not too bad. Had a 24-yard run. But after that, he had 16 out of the 20 carries. The quarterback had 1. And then Zamir White had 1 for 2 yards. Trey Tucker had 2 for 0 yards. That's it. This team is in such bad shape. And man, they thought they had high hopes. I mean, you had what you thought was a decent defense with Crosby. Geno Smith was supposed to come in and really pick up the offense. And then you got Genti, who was going to run it. And nothing's turned out right for them. The offensive line, without an offensive line, I don't care who the quarterback is or the running back. It's just been a miserable season. Injuries and then just bad play. New coaches too. And some of this could be just on the whole coaching staff as well and the scheming and so forth that they did to set up for games. I don't know, but it's going to be a massive turnover, I would think. I cannot believe Pete Carroll will be there next year. I'd be so shocked if that's the case. And I think that, I don't know if Geno Smith will be there either. At least he may start the season, but I can't believe that if the Raiders don't get the first pick, they're not going quarterback right off the bat. Now, in this game, for the New York Giants, Wan'Dale Robinson, he had, in this game, what did he have? Did I even do the receivers? He had 11 catches for 113 yards. I didn't even do the receivers. Sorry about that. Let me do that. Wan'Dale Robinson, 11 catches for 113 yards. He was targeted 14 times. Devin Singletary out of the backfield had 4 catches for 25 yards. So that's the 2 leaders on the team. For the Raiders, Michael Mayer, 9 catches, 89 yards. Trey Tucker, 5 for 49. So Bowers isn't in here. I mean, the Raiders just said, let's just make sure we do not win this game. Everybody who's any good is on the bench, injured reserve or whatever status. Now, Ashton Genti had 2 catches for 13 yards. That's a wrap for that. Now back to Wan'Dale Robinson, 11 catches for 113 yards. Sorry about all that. But that gave him 92 receptions on the season, which puts him at 6th all-time in receptions in a single season for the New York Giants. His own personal record, which he set last year, is 93 receptions, which he has a very good chance of breaking this next week. And also to get to 100 receptions in a season, which has only happened 3 times for the Giants. Malik Neighbors did it last year. Can you imagine if Malik Neighbors was on this team as well? And Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale's been playing really great football, but he's not a number 1 wide receiver typically. But he'd be a nice compliment to Malik Neighbors if they could get Malik Neighbors back on the field next year, which I'm sure they will. They have a lot of high hopes. They've got a nice running back set up. Jackson Dart looks good. They have these possible receivers. They have a chance to be one of these teams that maybe makes a big flip next year. They'll be working on should be an easy schedule. So that's a look at that for the New York Giants. Let's get to this Philadelphia Eagles game. Wow, this game was quite a game. The Eagles win it 13-12. It was such a tough game. The Eagles jumped out to the early lead and looked like they were just going to walk away with this game. And I think, in some ways, they played too conservatively and gave the Buffalo Bills a chance to get back in this game. And they almost did. And in fact, it came down to a 2-point conversion, which the Buffalo Bills did not convert. The Philadelphia Eagles jumped out to a 13-0 lead, held the Buffalo Bills to no points until the fourth quarter, when the Buffalo Bills came back, scored 12 points. And like I said, it was a 2-point conversion attempt at the end of the game that would have gave the Buffalo Bills the win. They went for that instead of a tie, and they didn't get it, and they lose. What a game. Both teams now are 11-5. Such a different kind of a game when one team's winning 13-0 and then the other team scores 12 points, but one short. And this is one of those things, the same thing happened in Chicago, which we'll talk about tomorrow, but in Denver a couple weeks ago. But when you keep playing games where you have to come from behind, sooner or later you don't do it. It's just the way it goes. You can't keep winning every game by coming from behind. But in this game, let's look at some of the stats. Really, you wonder how Buffalo lost this game in some ways. First downs, Buffalo 20, Philadelphia 11. Net yards, Buffalo 331, the Eagles 190. Rushing yards for Buffalo 120-82 for the Eagles. Passing net yards 211 for Buffalo, 108 passing yards for the Eagles. Wow. Kind of crazy, huh? Now, Buffalo, the Eagles got to Allen 5 times, sacked him 5 times in this game. That was one of the big things. Also, Buffalo fumbled the ball twice and lost one of them. That was another key issue in this game. Buffalo held the ball 35 minutes to 25 for the Eagles. Again, everything kind of leaning Buffalo's way. Now, in this game, Jalen Hurts, 13 completions on 27 attempts, not even 50%. Passing, 110 yards, 4.1 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, was sacked 1 time, 71.5 quarterback rating. Josh Allen, 23 completions, so 10 more completions than Jalen Hurts on 35 attempts for 262 yards, 7.5 yards an attempt, so pretty good there. No touchdowns, no interceptions, but he was sacked, like I said, 5 times for 51 yards. That's a lot of yardage to lose back, 88.0 quarterback rating. In this game, Saquon Barkley, 19 carries for 68 yards, 3.6 yards a carry. He was really pretty much it. Tank Bigsby had 2 carries for 7 yards, Jalen Hurts 3 for 5. Now for Buffalo, kind of held James Cook in check. 20 carries for him for 74 yards. That's 3.7 yards a carry. One of his worst games of the season, really. His longest run was only 10 yards. Josh Allen had 7 carries himself for 27 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So no passing touchdowns, but 2 rushing touchdowns. Now receiving, A.J. Brown, 5 catches for 68 yards. So remember, Hurts only threw for 110. Brown had 68 of those. Dallas Goedert, 3 catches for 8 yards, but another touchdown. He has been the guy in the end zone that they've been looking for. Devontae Smith, 2 catches for 25 yards. For the Bills, now Khalil Shakir had 6 catches. That was the most receptions for 35 yards. But Brandon Cooks had 4 catches for 101 yards. So one of those was a 50-yard bomb, which how he was even open at that point in the game was ridiculous. But 50-yard bomb for him on that play. He had the most yardage. So again, just like normal for the Bills, the ball was spread around quite a few to 8 different receivers caught a pass. 9 were targeted, but 8 of them caught a pass, which is kind of typical of the way the Buffalo Bills pass the ball. All right, let's look at some of these numbers in this game. For Jalen Hurts, passing touchdowns, he did have 1 touchdown. Despite not throwing for many yards, he did have a touchdown. He now, with that 1 touchdown, has 25 touchdown passes this season for the Eagles, which is good enough to tie him for 10th all-time for the Philadelphia Eagles in passing touchdowns in a single season with 25. He really isn't somebody who throws a lot of touchdown passes. And in fact, this is his first time making it onto the top 10 list for the Eagles. And that's at just getting to 25. The record is Carson Wentz with 33. So it's not even a number that's that high compared to a lot of other teams. All right, let's look at the Eagles. Receiving yards here. This has been kind of interesting to watch between yardage and touchdowns and receptions for the Eagles this season. But A.J. Brown has passed Devontae Smith and to move into 9th all-time in receiving yards for the Eagles. Devontae Smith was in 10th, but he only had 25 yards. Brown had 68. So now Brown has 5,034 yards receiving to Devontae Smith, who has 4,967. A.J. Brown will be in the 9th. He passed Brent Selleck. Devontae Smith is only going to need another 31 yards to catch Brent Selleck to move into 10th again, to move back into the top 10. But you got those 2 receivers, as far as receiving yards, pushing into the top 10 all-time for the Eagles. Now, like I said, Goddard had another touchdown. He's been having one almost every game, it seems like. But with that one more, he's now got 35, which puts him into a tie for 9th all-time in receiving touchdowns for the Eagles with 35. He ties Deshaun Jackson, who also had 35. So we'll see. One more, and he catches Jeremy Maclin, who had 36. You know, if he gets his 1 a game, he could do it. Now, looking at the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, with 262 yards passing, now has 3,668 passing yards, which is good enough to put him into 9th all-time in passing yards in a single season for the Buffalo Bills. He came into the game in 13th with that number. But with the 262 yards, moves into 9th place. So now Josh Allen, that'll drop Jim Kelly off this list. And Josh Allen now is starting to rack up all the top 10 spots. All that's left is Joe Ferguson has 1, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then Drew Bledsoe. Drew Bledsoe will be the rough one. He's up there at 3rd spot all time. Which, by the way, I was just mentioning that Drew Bledsoe is also on the New England top 10 passing yards in a single season. list. The only spot there that Tom Brady didn't have until Drake May came along. But Josh Allen having another good season, not as good as last year, though more sacks this year than he's ever had. And speaking of the sacks, this is a category where it's been different than last year. Josh Allen was sacked 5 times. He's now been sacked 43 times, which is good enough or bad enough, if you want to look at it that way, to be 6th all-time for the Buffalo Bills as far as being sacked in a single season. Ties Jim Kelly and Joe Ferguson. So for all the years that Josh Kelly's been on this team, this is the first time he's ever made it onto the top 10 as far as being sacked as a quarterback. And 43 times. So he's never been sacked more than 39 prior to this game. It's been a little bit of a more difficult season this year for him. All right, that's a look at some of the games. And like I said, I wanted to save these last 2 games because there's just so much going on with these between Williams for Chicago and McCaffrey for the 49ers. And then for the other game, Stafford, especially Stafford and Robinson. Stafford for the Rams and Robinson for Atlanta. Big game for Robinson. I'm looking forward to the playoffs as well. I will be putting up some numbers, game numbers, best players in a single game, most whatever category, passing yards in playoff history, that kind of thing. Be doing all those stats for the playoffs. So that'll be fun to look at. Now, tomorrow, we'll wrap up these 2 games. Then we'll go into our power top 10 teams, power rankings. And there's going to be some changes because at least 3 of the top 10 teams lost. And so that's going to definitely affect the ratings. And we'll see where everybody ends up on that. And then we'll look at the standings, the playoff scenarios. It's down to the last game. This is it. See what happens there. So we have a lot to look at for tomorrow. All right. Appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe. You can find it on Just the Stats NFL on YouTube, also on Spotify, Apple. You can find this podcast. And please like and subscribe. As I always say, it sounds like a broken record, but it really helps. Please, you can also comment if you'd like. Share a comment. Appreciate that. All right. So tomorrow we have our last podcast of 2025. Amazing. So with that, I'm out on this episode of Just the Stats NFL Top 10s for Tuesday. See you tomorrow.